Good afternoon. Today we are going to be presenting Chapter 7, Measuring Student Learning and Behavior Change. My name is Tammy Mazziotti. I will be presenting the first portion of the chapter, and the second portion will be presented by Lily Macias. This presentation provides an overview of assessment techniques and how school counselors can effectively use data to show that interventions are making a difference. Sometimes we realize our efforts aren't making the difference as we thought they would based on the data. As counselors, if we don't measure the effectiveness, we risk spending valuable time on strategies that don't actually move students forward. Data helps us refocus so our time and energy can truly benefit student success. This presentation will be solely focusing on making a difference with data-driven practices. Measuring our impact as school counselors. So this is really the question of why assessment matters. Assessment tells us more than whether students liked a lesson. We're really trying to understand if the lessons or interventions are creating an impact for students and the results are targeted to the initial interventions planned. It shows actual shifts in skills, attitudes, and behaviors. And assessment, when we measure outcomes, we ensure the work is making a real impact on students, not just providing a feel-good moment. Some of the challenges in measuring outcomes for counselors is we discover we're not having the impact they hope for. And also when we talk about time as counselors, our workload is often very impacted. So spending time on ineffective interventions is really wasted effort and time. Assessment matters because it really helps us to identify attitudes, skills, and behaviors and really moves beyond just the positive feedback. Assessment ensures the time we use as counselors in these interventions and lessons are truly impacting student success. When we talk about counselor reality, counselors are constantly multitasking and decisions about the best use of time. Measuring outcomes takes time, but it is essential. Slavin in 2006 really talks about providing feedback to students, which helps students understand why they have mastered and where they need to work on promoting self-awareness and ownership of learning. Slavin also talks about feedback to counselors on effectiveness. This really allows counselors to see whether interventions, supports, and programs are achieving the intended outcomes so they can adjust strategies. Feedback to parents on student learning. Communicating progress to parents is essential. This gives parents clear evidence of their child's growth in areas for improvement, fostering a stronger school-home collaboration. Information for placement and course selection. Data from assessment supports appropriate academic placement, and it really helps ensure students are enrolled in courses that match their readiness for future goals. And lastly, increase student effort and motivation. This really supports accountability. Measurement provides evidence for school districts and policymakers, demonstrating program impact in areas that are needing attention. So there are three types of assessments: diagnostic assessment, formative assessment, and summative assessment. Diagnostic assessment is the starting point, finding out what students know, misunderstand, or prefer. Diagnostic assessment helps us tailor lessons to student needs. Also, the tools include surveys, pre-tests, or quick check-ins with guiding questions. Next is formative assessment. This happens during instructions. It's about adjusting in the moment. Formative assessment helps us know if students are getting it or if we need to slow down, repeat, or change the strategies. Examples are asking students to explain a concept in their own words or summarize key ideas so far. Summative assessment takes place after instruction to measure proficiency or mastery. Summative assessment provides evidence of what students have achieved. Summative assessment also tells us how effective our teaching or interventions truly were. Measuring student learning effectively. McKay and Wiggins remind us to start with the end in mind. Before planning any activity or intervention, we need to define define what exactly we want students to know and to be able to do. This really means aligning our objectives with the way we assess students. If we say a goal is important, our assessment needs to measure it. It's also powerful to share objectives with students. When they know what the target is, they're more engaged and more likely to be motivated to reach it. The key questions that we should be asking ourselves when measuring student learning, first is, what are the desired learning outcomes? These should connect to learning objectives, state or district standards, and our ASCA national standard for school counseling. A second critical question is, how will we know if students learned it? There were both diagnostic and performance data come in. Having clear goals and assessment methods ensures we're measuring what really matters. The third question we're going to ask ourselves when measuring student learning effectively is, what counts as evidence? The answer isn't just tests or quizzes. Evidence can come from many different sources: real-world applications, project performances, or even student reflections. The important thing is that the method matches the achievement goal. We also need to be clear about what level of learning we're looking for, as we're asking for basic evidence that students understand a concept, or are we asking for competence and mastery? The distinction matters for how we measure progress. As counselors, our role is to prepare clear goals and content and to communicate those outcomes with students so they know exactly what success looks like. Measurement isn't something we do to students, it's something we do with them to help them grow. Feedback is essential. By providing ongoing feedback, we don't just evaluate, we empower students. They can take responsibility for their own progress and see how their learning connects to their future. When we think about outcomes, it helps to break them into categories. For knowledge, we might measure things like vocabulary, steps, or knowing the right people and resources. For skills, we might look at communication, study habits, emotional regulation, or career planning. And for beliefs, we want to see whether students value learning, hold high standards for themselves, and feel supported and respected in their environment. Taken together, these types of evidence give us a much richer picture of student growth beyond just test scores. So when talking about measuring learning, it is imperative to remember Bloom's taxonomy, which is a framework that helps us think about different levels of learning, moving forward from basic knowledge to higher order thinking. At the foundation, we have remembering, students recalling facts, definitions, or steps. Then comes understanding, where students explain ideas in their own words. Next is applying, using knowledge in new situations like solving a problem or practicing a skill. Above that is analyzing, breaking down information into parts, recognizing patterns, and seeing relationships. Then we move to evaluating, making judgments, weighing evidence, or defending a position. At the top is creating, where students generate new ideas, design solutions, or produce original work. This is the highest level of cognitive engagement. For us as counselors and educators, Bloom's taxonomy is powerful because it reminds us that not all students learn the same. It helps us design objectives, assessments, and activities that build from foundational skills to a deeper, more complex thinking. When we align our counseling lessons or interventions to these levels, we're ensuring that students don't just memorize information. They'll learn how to apply it, analyze, and create with it.
Okay, so there are important things to keep in mind when using existing assessment tools, and the things to keep in mind are the curriculum materials often include learning goals and learning assessment materials, but they must be revised to fit the student's developmental needs, precise, clear, and appropriate, and consider evidence that is gathered over time and across different situations. So as school counselors, when we administer these assessment materials, we need to make sure that it's precise and clear and appropriate for each developmental level. So questions to keep in mind as school counselors when evaluating an existing assessment is, does the assessment instrument link to important learning outcomes? Is the assessment appropriate for the learning goals of the intervention? So is it worth doing, right? Does it align to what we want the learning goals to, outcome to be? Is the assessment measure developmentally appropriate for this population? So is it relevant to the age group that we're administering this assessment to? Once the test is done, do the results make sense? And does other evidence corroborate the results? So once we get the results, it's important to also compare to results that others have previously conducted, and then just see what the differences were, and find out why, right? That's always very important, to analyze the results and compare it to other studies that have been conducted. So as far as our role as school counselors is, we need to effectively assess. The students' learning. So we're always looking at data and seeing where the needs are. And then ultimately what we want is to show that interventions and program components are making a difference in concrete, demonstrable ways. That's ultimately our goal, right? Making sure that what we're doing with students is effective and that it's working. And then another thing is communicating with parents, teachers, and other school counselors to gather necessary information about what the students already know and can do, and what instruction or training is needed to move them closer to stated goals. So we're always communicating, right, with all of our stakeholders, making sure that we already know what the students think, and if we already know what the students think and what we can start doing to get closer to the goals of the school, of the students, and overall as our community goals. School counselors, we're always going to be measuring changes in attitude, skills, and knowledge of students, right? So some ways that we can do this is by using scaled questions. So for example, we can use Likert scales. Likert scales are good for seeing, students' attitudes, opinions, or beliefs. But some things to keep in mind when using Likert scales is that it's important to eliminate forced choices. So sometimes it's not good to have just limited options for Likert scales. So for example, if we were to have a Likert scale that only had 1, 2, and 3, and 1 being strongly agree, 2 being neutral, and 3 strongly disagree, then that would prone students to not give us effective results or accurate answers, because it's kind of forcing them to choose one, right? So we kind of make it a little bit broad that can help us get effective answers. So for example, some of the example that I have here, 1 being strongly agree, 2 being agree, and 3 being neither agree or disagree, 4 being disagree, and 5 strongly disagree. It's important to keep it broad because sometimes students can fall in between some. And if maybe, even including slightly agree, that can also give us more of an accurate understanding of how they're feeling. So these are just few examples of how Likert scales can be. And one other thing to keep in mind is choices cannot overlap. So you can't have 2 of the same answer, right? So it all has to be different. And then be consistent with the direction of the scale on an assessment to avoid confusion. So, for instance, if we have a total of 5 questions on the Likert scale, we have to keep it consistent. So if we're going to choose 1 being strongly agree, then throughout the Likert scale, 1 has to be strongly agree. If you start changing it, then, we're not going to get effective results at the end, because then students will become confused and they might have chosen the wrong one. So always be consistent with the Likert scale, keep it the same throughout, and that way we have effective results. if we're doing a question on how much time on average they spend on homework every day, that one is good to include words like more than, between, and less than, because sometimes it's not just one specific amount, and maybe some days it could be like less than 1 hour. So sometimes they might not have a specific hour or two, so it's important to keep it like somewhere in the middle. And there's an example here on the slide. So it says more than 2 hours, number 2 being between 1 and 2 hours, between 30 minutes and 1 hour, and then even less than. And then maybe they don't spend an amount on homework. So none is always an option that you can put on a Likert scale. So measuring changes in attitude, skills, and knowledge continued. If we want to measure student skills, we can have them do skill demonstrations. We can also ask them what they would do in specific situations and have them role play behaviors. If we want to know more about what they already know, so what is it that students need to know that they do not already know, we can also do diagnostic assessments. And then student learning, of course, we can always perform tests, so measure by true or false or multiple choice questions. Okay, and now developing pre and post test. So measure what you want students to learn, right? So our role as school counselors to link school counseling intervention goals and outcomes to state and district curriculum standards, as well as to the ASCA national standards. And then we are demonstrating our relevance to the mission of our school and to the broader educational endeavors as well. So it's always important to connect our school counselor mission and values to the school's mission and values. When conducting pre and post test, there's a couple of steps that we need to, and the steps are, number 1, determining key ideas and concepts using learning goals. So of course, what we're trying to do is measure students' knowledge, attitudes, and skills. Number 2, brainstorming 10 to 15 possible questions that we want to assess. So if we are performing Likert scales, then it's important to, brainstorm 10 to 15 questions. So that way, number 3, we can select the 5 to 10 questions from that list. We don't want to keep it very lengthy because, of course, students will become uninterested. So if we keep it precise, clear, and effective, then we'll get better results from it. So we'll select 5 to 10 questions from the list that measure knowledge, attitudes, and skills. Number 4, we're formatting the paper so that it's 8 by 5 by 11 page, leaving room for students' name and title of the assessment. Number 5, photocopying the pre and post test for every student. Number 6, administering the pre-test before the lesson and use data to influence our instruction. And number 7, grade the pre and post test and calculating the percentage increase in knowledge. So I listed how to calculate the percentage increase in knowledge on the right hand side of the slide. So number 1, write an answer key. That way, when we're ready to grade the papers, it's easier to look at. Number 2, an equal number of pre and post test. We cannot use incomplete, right? So just keep a reminder, verbally remind them to complete the whole assessment. Number 3, grade all the tests and put the number correct on each page. That way it's easier and quicker for us to see how many they got correct, and then later on measure the percentage increase in knowledge. Number 4, add the total number correct for all pre-test. Number 5, multiply the total number of students by the number of questions on the test. And then number 6, divide the number correct by the total number possible. So for instance, 70 out of 100 equals 70% correct on the pre-test. Number 7, repeat steps 5 and 6 for the post-tests. And number 8 is the formula. So post minus pre divided by the pre increase, it will give you the increase in knowledge. So I just wanted to show some examples that were done to 5th grade students and 9th grade students, and these are pre and post test questions. It has listed the learning goals of what we're hoping we can help them learn at the end. And these are just multiple choice questions, so it makes it easier for 5th grade and 9th grade students to select. But yeah, it's important to keep it consistent throughout. And yeah, so these are just a couple of examples. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. We hope you found this presentation to be useful, and we hope that it provided a comprehensive overview of assessment techniques and how school counselors can effectively use data to show that interventions are making a difference. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us, and I listed our emails right here on this slide. Thank you so much, and have a good day.